Hey everybody, welcome to Interview Wednesdays. I'm your host Andrew Lewin, founder of SpeakUpForBlue.com, and welcome back to the Speak Up for Blue podcast. Here we talk about marine conservation, science, and all sorts of things that have to do with protecting the ocean. I really want to thank you for returning. If you're a returning listener, if you are just listening to this, you've come out at a right time, at a great time. This is episode 350. We are going to be doing an interview today with two people. This is the first time we've really done an interview with two people at the same time. We're doing it with Dr. Ed Hind and Marisol Flores, and I hope I pronounced that properly. She does both of them are doing work in Mexico right now, looking at managing water quality to accommodate a rapidly growing population in the Cancun area. So I think it's Quintana Roo, I think is the province, and it's going through massive development for tourism and all sorts of, residences and so forth, but mostly tourism. Water quality is being affected, fishing is going to be affected. Of course, there's climate change to battle with, but the biggest thing is water quality. So they're talking about how they are working with the local community in these areas to help accommodate these types of things, putting together a framework and whatnot. So it's going to be a lot of fun to listen to both of these guys. I just have to say, I want to thank them because it's interesting. You know, a lot of times when I do an interview, I do the interview in my office, and they're somewhere, the guest is somewhere around the world. A lot of times it's the U.S., sometimes it's South America, sometimes it's Australia, sometimes it's Europe. They're from all over the place. Ed and Marisol we're at a conference, and they're on the conference floor using an iPhone and the same microphone, the headphones with the microphone, and they're sharing an iPhone to do this. So they're doing it on a conference phone on a conference floor of a very big conference, over 1,000 people, and there's probably ambient noise going on. And we did get disconnected a couple of times, but they were very patient. I want to thank them for that. So I think that's a very good testament of them trying to communicate what they're doing to work in ocean conservation. It's a very interesting project. The sound quality may not be the best, but they put in the effort to do this. So I'm going to put the effort to edit it and make sure it does well. So I just want to let you guys know and thank our guests for this kind of stuff. But anyway, the stuff you're going to listen to today, I would like you to continue that conversation over at our Facebook group for the Speak Up for Blue community. You can go to speakupforblue.com/group, and you can join the Facebook group. All you have to do is use your Facebook account, put in a request to join after that link, and I'll let you in within a day at least, or within a few hours of me checking it. There's almost 200 people in this group. It's growing really, really fast, and I love the people that are in it. The people who are coming in are contributing, and they're asking questions, and they're sharing information, and we have some debates going on. We have some sharing of information of like resources and whatnot. It's fantastic. I really love the group. If you're in the group and you're one of those contributors, or you're thinking about being a contributor, do that, because this is where a lot of times the conservation really happens. So now we're going to get into it. So let's start the show. If you are sick of hearing of the doom and gloom of the ocean and not knowing what to do, you're in the right place. If you want to meet people working to protect the ocean, then you are in the right place. If you want to find out how you can get involved in protecting the ocean, then you are in the right place. This is the Speak Up for Blue podcast, and I am here to empower you to live for a better ocean. Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of the Speak Up for Blue podcast. I am your host, Andrew Lewin, founder of SpeakUpForBlue.com, marine ecologist, and self-proclaimed oceanpreneur. Today is Interview Wednesday, and I'm excited because we have two guests today. We rarely have two guests on at the same time, and I think I'm going to be doing this more and more as the software that I use is a little easier to do that. But we're going to be talking to two people, Dr. Ed Hind and Marisol Flores, who are working in Mexico in the province of Quintana Roo, which is the Cancun Mayan Riviera area that I know. I don't know that area very well. I just went there last year for the first time as a tourist. But we're going to be talking about tourism. We're going to be talking about managing water quality and managing natural resources in a rapidly growing population in this area, in the Quintana Roo area. And I think it's very important that we get this this project. We get a description of this project from an aspect of both biological science, physical science, and social science, where we're talking to bring in local communities to find out what they can do to save certain cultural practices, make sure they save their resources, their mangrove forests that help protect the coastline, their coral reefs that help protect the coastline. It's a very interesting landscape down there. If you've ever been, it's a really cool area that I highly recommend that you go and you visit. But when you do, and we're talking about this today, you do so in a sustainable manner. So you look at hotels and resorts that are actually practicing sustainable measures, and there are more and more every day that are doing such work. And I think it's important as tourists that we seek out these businesses that are trying to do some really good sustainable things in these areas. And I think we need to show our love for those people or those businesses by going and staying at those hotels and resorts. So we're going to be talking all about that, and I love that aspect. I really do. And I want, like I said in the pre-intro, both Ed and Marisol were at the International Conservation Congress for Biology, I think is the name. I always forget. It's ICCB. It's run by the Society of Conservation Biology, the same society that runs International Marine Conservation Congress, which I'm a part of. I'm the head of the sponsorship committee. Ed is actually is organizing it there. He's the chair of the actual conference that's going to be in 2018. But he went to ICCB to not only promote IMCC, the International Marine Conservation Congress, in 2018, but he's also there to, I think he presented, he met with some partners. This was in Colombia, I believe. And what I love the fact is Marisol and Ed wanted to get their message out so much that they shared an iPhone to do the interview, and they had, they each shared earphones, one earphone apiece, and the microphone to actually get this interview out. Now, the sound is actually pretty good considering they're on the conference floor. That's where they were trying to get the Wi-Fi. We got disconnected a couple times, so I tried to go in and edit it to the best of my ability, but just keep an eye out for that, or just be patient with the audio. But it's great information, it's great value, and I really appreciate both of them, Marisol and Ed, to work through all the problems and be patient by doing so. And I think that's really a testament to them and their communication ability. So, and of course, we love Ed. He's been on multiple times on this show, and hopefully Marisol will be on more than this time, because she was such a great speaker, such a great person that from the time that I met her. So we'll have her on again as well. But before we get into the interview, I would just want to let you know of our Patreon campaign. So like I mentioned before, if you've been listening to this episode, if you haven't, we have a Patreon campaign. The Patreon is a crowdsourcing website, or crowdfund source website, however you pronounce it. I don't know what you actually say to it, but essentially it allows people to contribute money in monthly increments to certain creators or certain people who are doing any kind of online communication. So that could be YouTube, podcasting, art, anything really that is digital or online mostly. But they are the people can contribute. They can become their patrons. So we're on there, Speak Up for Blue. We're trying to build a media company, but the idea is we're trying to build a social enterprise. As one, and what we mean by social enterprise is we want to serve the community. We want to serve the marine science and conservation community by helping out where we can, where others aren't be able to because the funding's not there or the resources aren't there. So our first project that's really in the planning stages is to create an online platform for people who want to become citizen scientists or are citizen scientists and want to discover new programs or share their thoughts and their reviews of other programs that they've been a part of in the past. We're going to have guests who manage citizen science programs to give descriptions of what they expect in citizen scientists, why they need them, how people can help, training materials, training videos, all that kind of stuff. We're going to be working to do that, to serve the citizen scientists. Because what I found, around the internet is there's nothing really there that I've seen, especially for marine conservation, for people who want to be citizen scientists. There's nothing there for the citizen scientists. They're there to discover programs, but not in full description. It's usually in a written description. And what I want to do is bring the people on. People can interact with those program heads They can really get excited about the project and then figure out a way to go to those, either whether it be a trip or it be at home or whatever that might be. But I think it would be kind of cool. So to help us out by donating or contributing to that cause, you can do so at speakupforblue.com/Patreon, Patreon. And all you have to do is you sign up. It's a really easy sign up process. It's very secure. I'm patrons of other people: Andrew Thaler, David Schiffman, some other Wallace J. Nichols, some other people. And the amounts per month could be anywhere from $1 and up. So it's up to you to figure that out. But in the meantime, we'd love to have you as a contributor and take process in building this program. Help us out, give us advice, offer us resources or anything like that we can have. It'd be greatly appreciated. I blog about this, and usually the blogs for this program is for patrons only. And I'll bring out some information later on, but these are the people who are helping me build this program. And it really helps out. So if you go to speakupforblue.com/Patreon, Patreon, you can become a contributor, become part of this project, and become part of helping out marine science and ocean conservation. Anyway, let's get back into the show. Let's get back into the show. Let's start with the interview. I think that'll be good because this is an interview show. I want you guys to listen carefully to Ed and Marisol, who are talking about their project where they're working with the local communities to manage water quality in a rapidly growing population, especially with tourism in the Cancun region, in the Quintana Roo, I believe, region. And I'm looking forward to you guys for hearing it. So here we go. Here's the interview, and I'll talk to you after. Hey, Ed. Hey, Marisol. Welcome to the podcast. Are you ready to dive in and talk about some ocean conservation?
Hello, Andrew. I'm perfect. Ready to go.
Right
I'm ready to plunge below the waves as usual.
I love it. Every time, Ed, you're on this show, you come up with a new way of saying that, and I love it. I think it's great. I think now we're holding you to it. The audience waits for something more clever and more clever every time you come on. Marisol, this is your first time. You did really well. We'll have you on again, and we'll just continue. We'll continue the tradition. How's that sound?
Yeah, I will innovate.
I love it.
Good.
This is
good.
great.
We're both good.
So this is interesting because this is the first time we've recorded an interview with two people on the same device, and we're doing this because Ed and Maggie, you guys are at the International Conservation Congress for Biology. Is that the acronym, ICCB?
It's the International Congress for Conservation Biology.
I got the two C's mixed up. Yes. So you guys are at a conference in Colombia, and it's all about biology. It's all about conservation. It's very similar to the International Marine Conservation Congress, except it includes terrestrial, aquatic, as well as marine. So let us know how's the conference going?
It's going great. I was invited by Nora Galvis from Colombia.
Okay.
To participate in a symposium focused on coral reefs, actually, all over the world.
Very nice.
There's lots of marine talks talking about diversity in marine science, but there's also some cool stuff on like sloths and flying foxes. So it's like the 1 week I don't want to be a marine scientist.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of interesting, especially like going to a conference where you're normally going to marine talks and interacting with people in the sort of the marine realm of conservation, and now you get just that whole breadth, and I think it's great. Now, what is the optimism like at a conference like this? Where you get a whole breadth of people. Are the presentations and the projects that people are doing, are they showing optimism or is it more pessimism?
The plenary talk this morning was amazing, but it was super pessimistic.
Yeah.
But there's also a lot of like optimism stuff going on. Some people have been talking about ocean optimism, but I think there's a lot of people. But it seems like there's a lot of novel solutions here, and a lot of, as you know from IMCC, there's a lot of diverse stuff. People trying to do things new ways. And this is run by the same society, the Society for Conservation Biology, as IMCC. So there's a lot of people from things like areas like conservation marketing and looking at conservation through new sort of religious approaches and stuff. So there's a lot of innovation, which is obviously optimistic. So there's a lot of optimism to balance out and hopefully outweigh the pessimism.
Oh, absolutely. Well, speaking of pessimism, and I want to know if this is being talked about there, especially at the Coral Reef Symposium. The movie Chasing Coral came out recently on Netflix. Is anybody talking about that documentary?
Yes, we talk a little bit about that one, and especially in the Healthy Reefs Initiative, we also did a bleaching monitor in the Mesoamerican Reef with other partners. So yeah, we talk a little bit about that, and we also talk about the Varadero Reef here in Colombia, which is now threatened because they want to dredge and build a channel, for the boats. And this Varadero Reef has like 80% coral cover, more or less.
Oh,
it's
wow.
Amazing, something that we are not seeing.
Right.
So this is very optimistic, but at the same time, it's very pessimistic because it's threatened by the industry and other interests.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. It's kind of interesting how, Chasing Coral came out and then this conference was not long after. I would imagine that it's getting a little bit of play or a little bit of talking points on it, just because there's a lot, like you said, Ed, there's a lot of conservation marketing going on and changing people's behaviors. Because I feel that the group that we have here for the podcast, we were talking about it, the movie, and we all had the same thoughts. It was great for information on what's happening to coral reefs in terms of bleaching and sea surface temperature rises and whatnot. But there wasn't a lot of talk on how people are innovating and trying to protect certain reefs and how local communities are affected by the changes in the reefs and whatnot. So it's kind of interesting with that. But I don't want to take up the whole time with this because we're going to talk about the project that the two of you are collaborating on with other collaborators as well. But before we do, first of all, thank you very much for doing this from the conference. This is great. You're actually on the conference floor on an iPhone, and you're still coming in pretty well, which is great. So just to warn the audience, if they go in and out every once in a while, it's just because they're on a conference floor and they're doing the best with the Wi-Fi connection, I would imagine. But thank you guys for doing that. But before we get into what we're going to talk about, Marisol, we don't know much about you. We know a lot. The audience has heard Ed before, but we don't know much about you, or the audience doesn't. So why don't you take some time and briefly describe who you are and what you do?
Yeah, well, my name is Marisol Rueda, and I am based in Playa del Carmen, Quintana Roo in Mexico, which is the Southeast Peninsula. And I work for the Healthy Reefs for Healthy People initiative, and I am Mexico's coordinator. I have a master in science applied on marine resources management. And what we do in the Healthy Reefs initiative is that we create report cards on the health of the Mesoamerican reef. And those report cards come together with a set of recommendations of how or what do we need to do to improve the health of our Mesoamerican reef.
Okay, cool. Have you heard anything recently about and I shared this with you the other day, the story where a Swiss insurance company is working with hotels to provide, I think it's a pilot study in that area, in the Cancun, Mayan Riviera area, to work with hotels to provide insurance for coral reefs if coral reefs get damaged by storms and hurricanes and whatnot. Have you heard about that at all in that area? Is there any talk about that?
Yeah, I saw the news. I haven't read it, and I don't know if it's the same project that Marfon has, because they are working on things similar. Probably it's the same thing, or probably it's another one. But yeah, about having insurance, especially because we are living in a place that has a high risk of hurricanes.
Oh, okay.
So we are preparing in case something like that happened. Like in 2005, there was the Vilma hurricane that destroyed completely the state. And obviously the reef was very affected.
Yeah. Okay. So, because I think it's going to be an interesting project. There's obviously a lot of questions that people have about it, just from the article, which I'm sure can be addressed with more detailed report. But the article on, I think it was Bloomberg that I sent it to you, Ed, it was very general. So I think a lot of people have questions about it, but it's definitely a way people are innovating to help coral reefs in that area. But speaking of that area, we're going to talk about a project that the two of you are collaborating on. And I'm really interested in hearing about it and sharing it with the audience, because I think we've discussed it briefly before the project actually got started back in February. But let's hear one of you. I'm not sure who wants to go first, but let's hear a description of the project, your roles in it, and then we'll kind of move on from there.
Nice. We're pointing at each other to decide who goes first. We're sharing an iPhone headphone glass. This is quite fun. So yeah, the project. So this is a 16-month project funded by the British Academy, a UK firm, and it's called Land to Coast. And the project is looking at the impact of land use change on the marine environment, and specifically looking at where there is good governance between land and coast. We're doing this project in Quintana Roo in Mexico. It's a region on the Yucatan Peninsula, which has pretty famous like forest land management. Like Quintana Roo, I think, Marisol, correct me if I'm wrong, but it has about 80% of its original primary forest. So, you know, in other regions of Mexico and Latin America, there's been a lot of deforestation. That hasn't happened here.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of community-based management of forestry. I think also some sort of multinational organizations like the Forestry Stewardship Council have been involved. But also in Quintana Roo, you have very good marine management in places. So if you go to Punta Allen, which is a small fishing village, also the Banco Chinchorro is further down in Quintana Roo, which is a kind of offshore island, archipelago type of area. And again, Marisol will correct me if I'm wrong. She's been there and I haven't. But again, that was at one stage, that was a Marine Stewardship Council certified lobster fishery, because the fishermen were very much involved in the management of the fish, and they were taking measures to make that sustainable. And it was a good lobster fishery. So you had really good kind of marine management, really kind of good land management in places. So it's the kind of place you look at, well, okay, so you've got those management, is the land management and therefore the marine management interconnected. And so the project we're working on is a collaboration between university in the UK as well as Manchester University in the UK, but also very importantly, a lot of partners from Mexico. So we're working with UNAM, which is the National Autonomous University of Mexico, if you translate it into English, and also a university called ECOSUR, which is the College of the Southern Border, which is something else in Spanish, and that's my weakness on this project, my lack of Spanish.
You are doing great.
Not on this podcast. And also, obviously, we're working with Marisol, who's at an NGO, non-governmental organization called Healthy Reefs for Healthy People, who has a lot of, one of the reasons we're working with them is because they have a lot of contact with us. And so that's the premise of the project. As I said, it's a 1.5 year project. And do you want me to go into details of what we've done on the project so far?
Yeah, I think it would be great. Yeah, please do.
Yeah, I mean, so the way we kick this project off is because obviously a lot of us were coming from outside, not necessarily the issues on what the kind of academic or policy literature, which was available in English. And so we came across, it's very important, therefore, to speak to our local partners as well as local stakeholders. So in March of this year, we held 2 workshops in one town called Tulum, which you may have heard of. It's quite a famous tourist town just at the southern end of the Riviera Maya. I think it was a big hangout for hippies in the 60s and 70s, but now it's very high-end and high-end hipsters, I guess. And then also in a town a bit further down in the Yucatan Peninsula, Quintana Roo, called Bacalar, which is just near the coastal city of Chetumal. I was talking to people about the issues which land use was causing on the marine environment, if there were any, and especially looking at any land use change, what was going on, and if that was causing any impacts. And actually, coming from this, I hadn't talked to Marisol in advance really about what I was going to find, and anyone who lived in Quintana Roo would have known this already, but it was kind of shocking in the first workshops we had there, because I'd read about this famous forestry governance and I read about this famous marine governance, but then obviously there's you've been on vacation to Quintana Roo, to the Riviera Maya, I know earlier this year or last year. And so you'll know it's a region which is really growing in terms of the kind of factor, which is going on here. So I think the population was in the hundreds of thousands in the 1970s or lower. Is that right, Marisol? Yeah. So I think it's above 5 million in the state.
Oh,
and,
wow.
Playa, the city that Marisol lives in, is the fastest growing tourist destination in the world.
Yeah, it's around 19-22% per year.
Yeah, 19-22% population per year. So imagine anywhere else in the world. So it's gone from being an almost uninhabited place, because it's quite large, very, very low population density, to extremely high population density. And I believe that about 30-40% of the people work directly in tourism, and the other 30-40% of the rest of the population work for those people in tourism. And then you obviously have millions of tourists visiting each year.
Of course, yeah.
So what we found in these workshops is that even though you had good land management in the area, 50 miles inland or whatever, you had really good managed, pretty well managed marine areas, which are enforced to a great extent, and where there is legislation.
Mm-hmm.
The coral reef here, and Marisol will tell us, she's in charge of publicizing all the that the reef here is still very much in trouble, and not just the reef, also the seagrass meadows and the mangrove. And when we went to this workshop, I've never been to a place where I've seen like 90, 95 to 100% of the stakeholders say water pollution, water pollution, water pollution.
Really?
Caribbean, the Turks and Caicos Islands, and if you ask people there what's the cause of degradation to the marine environment, they're going to go maybe overfishing, maybe climate change, maybe ocean acidification, but those things aren't even really on the cards in this area, because water pollution is so damaging. And I'm sure Marisol will tell you a bit about the reef condition in a second, but just to give you an idea of why it's such a problem, and this was what we were told in the workshops and some of the field work we've done so far, is it's quite a unique region, the Yucatan Peninsula. It's limestone geology, and what that means is you have these kind of underwater rivers. So instead of normal rivers which just come out straight at the coastline, you have these underwater rivers called cenotes, which they come out in almost, I guess, under springs. And so instead of coming out right at the coast where the damage wouldn't be too bad for the reef, they come out actually under seagrass meadows and under the reef, and they have it's and also the main problem then is that all these new hotels which have been built and the settlements around them to house the people who work in the hotels in this industry, I believe I'm right in saying, and Marisol will correct me if I'm wrong, only 35% of the wastewater is treated. The wastewater, by various methods, ends up in these underground rivers. It comes straight out on the reef, and some of the water actually comes out in kind of black clouds of almost smoke. So if you've seen photos of, like, if you remember the footage of Deepwater Horizon, when oil was coming up from the ocean floor in the Gulf of Mexico, looks like that. It's raw sewage. It's called, I think the term used locally is aguas negras. Aguas negras. And so it's not there all the time, but when it is there, obviously that is extremely, I think it's in times of rain and stuff, I mean, damaging. And where Marisol lives, there's a couple of these underwater rivers, and they're coming. And so I think the reef in Playa del Carmen is in a very bad state resultantly. Maybe Marisol can talk a bit more about how the water is to the reef, I guess.
Yeah, well, in general, in the Mesoamerican reef, of the 248 sites we have data from, the majority, around the 70%, are between a fair and poor condition. Around 20% is in a critical condition, and the remaining 10% divides between a good or very good condition. So most of the reefs are between fair and poor condition. In Quintana Roo, we have different areas, different marine protected areas, and other areas that don't have protection. But generally, area ranges between critical and good. Few places are in very good condition, like Limones, which is located in Puerto Morelos National Reef Park, which is at the north of Playa del Carmen. And this place, Limones, has 30% of coral cover of elk horn coral, which is great because this is one of the most important species of coral that we have because it's a reef builder. And generally all the reefs range between 17-18% of coral cover, so having 30% is way high up for this place. So this place, Limones, was closed for touristic activities and any other activities such as fishing, and only research is allowed in this area with a special permit. So wastewater, it's totally, I think, the worst threat that the reef is facing right now in Quintana Roo. Not only because the water has an inadequate treatment, but also we don't have enough water treatment plants to have enough services for the growing population. Sometimes the new neighborhoods don't hook to the system also because it's very expensive.
Right.
So even though if we have the infrastructure, we are not using it. And also the standards of the water quality established by the federal government are followed here in this area, but they are not enough for this type of karstic system, which is like a Gruyere cheese below us. We have all these underground rivers, and the standards that we need to be higher, and according to the Cartagena Protocol, which is an international protocol to have better standards for the water that is coming back to the reef. So basically, that's the problem, and it's not only the coastal zone because of the hotels, but also it comes from the urban area and the rural area too.
So,
urbanization, and it's just none of this. Yeah.
So essentially what you have is you have a growing population in an area that hasn't seen this type of growth ever, and you're seeing an infrastructure that's just right now that's just not there, and even if it was, there's still some problems that could arise from it, and you've got a hotel industry that's booming, I would imagine, as well, which could also affect sort of the water quality problems if the regulations aren't there. How are that when because tourism's so big? How is it being managed right now? I mean, obviously it's a booming industry, so the government has to be careful in terms of what kind of regulations they put in. But how are government regulations sort of managing the new hotels? And I'll give you an example of sort of what I'm getting at is. I went to Cuba last year, and any new hotel in Cuba has to follow certain setbacks from the ocean. They can't be within, I think it's like 400 meters, the actual hotel. And there's a number of regulations that move into that. Is Mexico seeing the same sort of regulations put into developed or new developments for hotels? Because when I was in Mayan Riviera, looks like a lot of space to develop more hotels. Are they undergoing different types of regulations than the old hotels that were there?
Yeah, actually, Quintana Roo, all the coastal area is protected and it has regulations.
Okay.
It's the best regulations that we have compared to the other Mesoamerican countries. And we have assessed that in the Healthy Reefs Initiative too. But the problem is that these regulations are not enforced. So we also have these regulations of not tearing down the mangrove, not building on top of the dunes, respecting the height of the buildings, etc. But the bad news is that we are not following these rules.
Right.
And there's a lot of corruption, and people is buying the permits, etc., to do whatever they want. So that's the thing that we are lacking, enforcement.
Yeah, and there's really two problems. And as I said, this project actually focuses on the governance of the land and the sea. That's why it's called Land to Sea. And so, okay. Absolutely, Marisol's just summarized it there. But one of the problems is you have really competent marine protected area managers in Quintana Roo. They work for an organization called CONAMP, which is basically the national authority in Mexico in charge of managing protected areas.
Okay.
We, as part of the project, some of my colleagues have been interviewing some of these protected area managers, and they've been saying, we're doing what we can to manage these marine protected areas, and the fishery is closed down where it needs to be or regulated where it needs to be, and because they might kick the corals and break them. So that stuff is happening. But they say there is this polluted water coming in, this polluted groundwater. And we try to make a case about this. We try to approach the national government or higher government, and we don't have anyone really to go. No one's really us. So there is this, one of the problems here is this breakdown or the lack of the governance structure for people who are in a college, to go and solve this problem. I mean, this is, as I said, I've worked in other areas, like solving climate change is super hard, like especially locally, global issue, but water pollution is a problem we know how to solve. We just have to treat the water, and we know how to treat the water. But because the governance system is not there, in certainly in this region of Mexico, that is one major issue. And so there's people who know it's a known problem, that it should be fixable, but something needs to be done there from a governance perspective.
Yeah, now we are not joking about the health, but also about the, because if we don't solve these problems in the water, in the near future we will have polluted water, and we are using this water not only to swim in the ocean, but also to take a bath, to brush our. So we are drinking this water. This is our only source of water in Quintana Roo.
Yeah, and the problem, like, it may not have been a problem 5 years ago, but one of the other parts of the project that I've been working on is interviewing people who work in the marine tourism industry. So I've been going around to scuba diving shops in Puerto Morelos, which is a small town just north of Playa del Carmen, and Playa del Carmen, talking to dive masters and dive instructors and people who've been, from anything from 5 to 20 years. And a lot of them are starting to say, like, 4 to 5 years ago, this got to a stage where it is now starting to affect a state where 35% of the industry is tourism. Dive masters told me they have tourists now coming out of the water with rashes on them because of the pollution, and they've some of the people working in the industry have told me they've had people coming. A lot of them would tell me they wouldn't swim in the water themselves.
That's unreal.
Yeah, so it's like it's pretty serious. So I mean that is it's starting to threaten people's livelihoods, and in a way, like that's really bad. But actually, from this governance problem we're talking about, where we know the problem, that gives some hope. I don't want to be completely negative. That gives some hope because we know there's a problem, and so we can start to go about solving it. And we know that one of the problems, we see, like, we're still midway through our data collection, so we don't know totally yet. But it seems like a lack of a governance structure is one of the issues here, and that people can start to work on that. And there are some, I'm sure Marisol will tell you, that Marisol herself works for an NGO, but there are some NGOs and small people's organizations now in the area starting to win some small environmental victories and also starting to get their voice heard.
Yeah, we have the Watershed Council, the Yucatan Peninsula, so it's a Watershed Council. And Healthy Reefs Initiative is part of this, as well as other NGOs and even government of the local government, the ones in charge of the water, and the National Commission of Natural Protected Areas is also involved in these copies. But the thing is that all these and especially the solutions move forward very slowly compared to the rate we are creating the damage. So as we say in Spanish, and probably will not make sense in English, but we are killing the hen of the golden eggs, because Quintana Roo is the state that produces more income for the whole country from tourism, more than 38%. So if we don't have healthy reefs, beautiful beach, and beautiful reefs to keep doing this industry of high tourism, start having a very bad situation economically.
Yeah, and as a research project, this is not the worst finding in the world. It is bad. There's a problem. We have experts in governance on our project from UK and from Mexico, and they can start to make recommendations on what needs to happen, to kind of sort of move this governance along. The second problem we talked about is a harder one. Like in the workshop, we took the 5 reasons that there was these land use is having an impact on the marine environment. And as we've already talked about a lot, the number one reason was groundwater contamination of these underwater rivers. Well, I think the second main reason given was lack of governance, which we've talked about a bit there. But then I'm glad Marisol mentioned it, because as an outsider to the country, I don't like to talk about it too much without having it confirmed. But the third reason is, corruption. That's a problem. And also the fourth reason they gave was deforestation. And here the corruption and deforestation are linked. They're not really talking, the people in our workshops weren't really talking about deforestation in land. I mean, this is an area where mahogany is cut a little bit before. It's an area where chicle, which is chewing gum, which involves extracting a chicle from a tree. Right. But it's not that kind of deforestation. It's not inland. Most of the deforestation is coastal, and a lot of it is actually mangrove deforestation.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And it's to build hotels. Like if you go on Google Earth now and you look along the Riviera Maya and you look along Playa del Carmen, you'll see areas where there's mangrove and then there's no mangrove, and there's supposed to be mangrove. And I understand, and Marisol confirmed this, I think, cutting mangrove now is illegal.
Yeah, it is.
It is illegal,
which is a good thing.
But because of corruption, mangrove is, and this has come back a lot in our interviews. It's not just me saying this. Like 10 or 20 people have told us this. Mangrove has been cut down, and it shouldn't be being cut down, and no one is really doing anything about it. I think there's a small legal loophole which allows people to do it, because the planning permission was given a long time ago. But there's definitely tourist developments getting away with stuff.
I'm sure there are some cases like there have been all around the world where it's better to ask for forgiveness than for permission, where they will cut down the mangroves and then come back and be like, oops, we didn't know, or we didn't realize we weren't allowed to do this. And then they'll pay the fines if it's enforced, and then they'll continue on their way. Say, well, now that it's gone, we can develop here. I'm not saying it's happening down there for sure, but that's happened in other areas here in Canada and the US. It's happened in a lot of other places where companies, all sorts, tend to do that historically. And I'm sure it still goes on sometimes now.
Actually, it is happening, just the way you described it.
Yeah.
And also, people is burning the mangrove. So when you have a forest of any type that was on fire, now the use of that soil changes in the plants, and you can do anything you want. So that's the other technique they are using.
Right. So they cause fires.
Exactly. In order to build. There's a very known case that happened with Tajamar. Probably people have heard about it, but it's an area in Cancun that we used to have a beautiful mangrove inside the city that you could see when you were walking there or passing by a car. From one night to the next day, the industry went there and tear down all the mangrove. It was around 54 hectares, if I remember correctly.
That's terrible.
So this was that year, like 2 months ago. No, 1 month ago. It was one.
Hello? I think we cut out a little bit. Marisol?
So it's good news.
Oh, there we go. Sorry, Marisol, sorry, you cut out for a little bit.
Yeah?
Can you just start off just after the 54 acres? Sorry, you cut out for a little bit.
Yeah, so this last month, this case was won. A lot of NGOs were working on this, but especially SEMDA. And now industry has to make reforestation of this area with mangroves.
Oh, good.
So it's an example of something good that was done. The bad news is that we had to face this case with a lot of tears in our eyes. And now they have to reforestate a huge area that could be saved.
And this, and I think it's great that
SEMDA is sorry.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I think it's great the fact that there are NGOs in place in the area to act when these things happen. I think that's really important. We don't see enough, especially local NGOs, being able to be put in a position like that where they can act and say, "Hey, wait a minute, this is illegal. This is not right. Let's go to the courts and let's settle this." I think that's it's very admirable for all the NGOs who were involved to go and do that, because I know that's not an easy battle to do. So that's fantastic. But what I want to do is you guys are still there, right? I can hear you.
Yeah, we're
Okay.
here. We're good.
What I want to just kind of clarify, you guys have been saying putting, this project's all about governance and establishing a governance model that will work. Can you explain to me and the audience what you mean by governance? What does that actually mean, and how is it implemented?
Well, two things actually. I should make this clear because I know my colleagues would. There's a difference between governance and management, and kind of management is what you like a marine area or like a forest manager. So maybe like I guess DFO would very much be involved in management if you're in Canada, or
Right.
NOAA, National Fish and Wild, or National Parks.
Yep. Ed?
Governance, I guess that's where the Yeah, you can hear me.
Now I can hear you. Yeah. Sorry about that. You cut out for a little bit.
Andrew?
Yeah. I can hear you. You just cut out for a little bit.
Where do you want me to go? Where do you want?
Right after you said.
Okay, no worries. So yes.
Right after you said DFO and NOAA.
Okay, yeah. So like we have like the management of organizations like DFO and NOAA, the Mexican equivalents. That is to a greater extent working, because that is more of the local level. I think Mexico is again a federal system. Some of that is working, but what you're missing is the higher level governance from two perspectives. One, there's a lack of, as Marisol said, there's a lack of the framework there, the governance framework for specifically for water management and pollution management. That doesn't really exist. So there's nothing for the managers to enforce. They have, that the framework they need to stop water pollution is not there.
Okay.
And then there's also the second thing we were just talking about a second ago, is the second problem of corruption. As researchers, this is a worst finding for us. This is a problem which is not easily solvable. Where you have and corruption can affect at the lower level of management as well as governance, and we don't data happening. And I like to cuss, but there's definitely corruption present in the area, and that's basically where there's a willful lack of governance. And potentially a willful lack of management, and that's a harder thing to deal with as academic researchers, because we don't really have the tools to overcome corruption by recommending governance or management changes, because obviously if there is corruption, then people aren't open to hear it. So then you have to start which how you might do that, and it's been obviously that's a problem with the mangrove cutting, and as many of your listeners will know, losing mangroves is disastrous. Because we've already been talking about water pollution, those can often be a buffer for pollution, but these are also fish nurseries. So when you lose mangroves, you start to lose the place where young fish, I think like groupers and some types of snappers, where they grow up. So don't forget, a lot of people are coming here to snorkel on the reefs, to dive reefs, and they're not seeing fish anymore. And that's one of the reasons they're starting to turn away. But if I can just add like one more thing, Marisol told a nice little story of hope there in Cancun, where SEMDA, the Mexican environmental law NGO, have got involved and tried to save things a bit. Well, actually, the one group of people who can overcome corruption, in my opinion, is the tourists visiting Quintana Roo, and the people who work in Quintana Roo in tourism, because the people who work in tourism, well, they once they become to a situation where it's desperate for them and they start to complain, then they have a voice, and people have a voice, that all people have votes. So that is important. But also, like, as we said, the problem here is it's like whether you have corruption or not, someone to take advantage of that, and it's the tourism industry and the development industry who are taking advantage of that governance failure and management failure. And so someone else has to act in lieu of their responsibility. And one of the things which started to come, there was one interview I did where this dive guy who did bespoke tours for tourists who tended to come back, he said, I turned up this year, and the hotel I was staying in, was what a tourist, the hotel was, and I was shocked. I was disappointed, and I won't stay again.
Right.
More enlightened tourists, and this is the job of people like you and I and Marisol, is to communicate these things which enlighten people. With more enlightened tourists, you realize that hotels and developers are doing things they shouldn't be, then we have hope, because we have the hotels are not going to make money if people aren't
Yeah,
mental, ethical.
for sure.
So something, here is a bit of a story of optimism. Optimism there. There's your listeners can do. I'm sure many people listening to this podcast been on holiday. You go at the home, and you can go on Google Earth and you can see if it's built on a mangrove, and if it is, stay somewhere else.
Yeah.
And so with the restaurants, demanding that the restaurants are not selling seafood that has a closed season, for example, because many commercial species have seasons in Quintana Roo, like lobster, like grouper,
Right.
octopus. So we need to inform ourselves as tourists every time we go to the region, not our own country or our own city. So I think that relies totally also on us to start demanding to the services to come to have a good management.
Yeah, I think it's a great, I think that is something of hope, because you're right. In an area that's really dependent on tourists have a great voice, and I think, like you said, it's up to people like us to get the word out, to say, hey, tourists, you have the power to do so, and perhaps offer the tools to show the degradation that has happened in the past for a hotel. Right. So like when you look on something like Yelp or TripAdvisor, when we did our booking for a hotel down there, there's no information on whether that hotel built over a mangrove or whether it dredged all the seagrass away from the beach. It's not on there. And if we can provide tools that provide that type of information for people so that they can make a better decision. Same with the seafood down there. When you're going down there, here's an example. If you're on Facebook and you're excited about your trip and you start putting posts about Mexico or Mayan Riviera or Playa del Carmen, all of a sudden you can get an ad of saying, here's a seafood guide for Playa del Carmen, or here's a hotel guide for Playa del Carmen, where to go, what not to go. Here are the most sustainable ways of getting a great trip in by protecting the environment and supporting the local people there, whether the local fishers or local tourism boards. Those are the type of innovative ideas that we can do to really help people with providing them with the information that they need to do for those local areas. Okay, so we had some problems with the connection, but we're back again. Let's wrap up this interview, because what I want to do is I want you guys to give us an update on where you're at now and where this project is going to go, what you expect to get by the end of this project, and do you think you'll be able to provide what you were hoping for at the beginning of this project?
Yeah, so I mean, like, we're halfway through, or maybe like 2/3 of the way now through our data. A lot of it is interviews with people involved in environmental management, but also in the tourism sector. We're just about to start talking to fishermen and fisherfolk in the small town just south of the Riviera Maya. What we can do is we can take everything we've been given and we can start to put a case together, a model together for how better governance should be made. So there'll be that kind of academic output, but we're going to go beyond that. Obviously, as researchers, and as a conservation biologist myself, or conservation social scientist, biologist, whatever you want to call me, we want to have an impact. So one of the things we'll definitely be doing is writing policy initiatives, but we'll also be going back to the stakeholders who we started the project with, tell them what we found. And these stakeholders we talked to originally, they also work, as I said, for these national institutions. They'll be in a position to work with us to start to put this case to people who are able to reform local management, but also look at a higher level, that kind of governance level, and try and be doing some feedback work.
That'll be awesome. Marisol, you were going to talk. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Collecting our data, start analyzing data all together and making a case for how things can change. So so I mean, what we really want to do now is to start to link together this good coastal governance with good coastal management with this good like inland forestry management, and really rectify the problem in the kind of near coastal zone where this tourism has been developed. That needs to be brought into the system as well. That needs to be managed, and that needs, rather than need better management, that needs governance reform, a new framework for governance. So we'll be working on that. We're excited to make recommendations, and we're excited to get back to our stakeholders.
That sounds fantastic.
And we're starting to see in other projects. And as Marisol probably mentioned, there's there's already some sort of good news stories coming out of the region in terms of fisheries governance. So there is hope here. I think Marisol wanted to just talk about that fisheries governance briefly if she can.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
a good example of optimism, just to wrap up with happy faces and not only crying.
Yeah, for sure.
It's an initiative called Kanankai Alliance, which means the guardian of the fish in Mayan.
Okay.
And this initiative has different sectors involved, and the most important one is the fishermen, the cooperatives of these fishermen in different parts of Quintana Roo, the government, the academia, the NGOs, and funding institutions too. And this initiative is in charge of creating fish refuges or no-take zones, where no fishing is allowed. And the fishermen are the ones that are proposing these areas. And now they are seeing that these sites have 10 times more biomass of commercial fishes and lobster, for example.
Awesome.
Yeah, than areas that have no protection, or even than areas that have marine protection. So this is a great example of things that are working out, and of networking and doing some intersectorial work.
So yeah, I mean, it's really working for the coastal zone. There is good marine management here. That's not a problem. That is not why the ocean is threatened here. So the example Marisol talks about there with the K&K Alliance, that is what we need to transfer now to the land coast governance. It's about linking up what's happening on the land with the coast. So empowering the people who are doing marine management with a framework which allows them also to tackle this issue of water pollution and mangrove deforestation. Those are the two things which need to stop right now in Quintana Roo.
Exactly. And these fish refuges are providing us of more commercial fishes, but also of more parrot fishes, which are in charge of eating the macroalgae that is growing on top of the coral reefs and killing them. Mm-hmm. And the macroalgae is growing because we have contaminated water of improper sewage treatment. We have a lot of nutrients in the water, and that's why the macroalgae is growing so fast. So the fish refuges are also helping to try to control these things naturally, but obviously we need to work out the problems in the land, because if we keep going as we have done, this will be a never-ending problem.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's good that there's some optimism. There are some problems and some progress to be made, but it sounds like by engaging the local community in terms of tourism, just residents, the fishing community, and so forth, you're really getting a good feel for what's happening down there, and that seems really important. We don't always hear about this type of conservation being done, which is really nice to know. I mean, the fact that the water quality is the biggest problem, but the management systems like marine protected areas are in place, which is a great thing. And you would just think that if the water quality can get better and some governance can be put in to provide managers with the means to get some recourse or some progress in some kind of way, it seems like that will really work out in the long term. So Marisol, Ed, thank you very much for joining me. I know we had some connection problems, so I appreciate your patience. This is great. I know it's not easy to get away from a conference, especially when you're in another country with a lot of people that you probably haven't seen in a while, to talk to us. So I really do appreciate it. I wish I could be there. I really do wish I could be there in person for many, many reasons. But I'm looking forward to the audience hearing this. And our audience here from Speak Up for Blue, we really want to thank you guys for letting.
Can I just finish with one message for your audience?
Absolutely, yeah, that'd be great.
Like, my message is: don't stop going on vacation to the Riviera Maya. Don't stop going to the Yucatan Peninsula. It's beautiful. I've never seen nature like it. It's in the Caribbean area. But like, when you go there, because people's livelihoods are depending on you going there. You know, don't be scared off by the water pollution. But when you go down there, ask the people in your hotel, what are they doing with their wastewater? And if they're not doing, if they can't give you a good answer, then tell them they need to be doing more and stay somewhere where you can get a good answer next time.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a very realistic approach, and not necessarily, you know, a lot of people, I think when they go down there, they don't want to ask questions because they don't want to, you know, make people uncomfortable, or, you know, they'll say, I'm not a protester or anything like that. But if you ask questions about it and enough people ask about it, then they'll actually, the hotel will actually start displaying when they do some good things. Like if they put in water treatment. The hotel that I stayed at was very good at demonstrating how they are protecting sea turtles. And they had a conservation area and everything. I think it's great.
Yeah. If the hotel realizes that water pollution is an issue for tourists and the people who stay there, they might start to do something about it. Be super polite, but just ask.
Yeah.
And many hotels are doing great things also.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not that all are doing wrong.
Right. So that's great. I think that's a great message to end on. I think it gives our audience, still a will to go there, because, like you said, it is a beautiful area. I went there for the first time this past January. It definitely won't be my last. And I think it'll be a lot of fun to see what the audience members think about this, because I know it's a popular destination for people here in Canada and Toronto and the West Coast as well, and of course the U.S. And when we went, there were a lot of people from the UK that went there as well. So it's obviously a worldwide destination, and for a reason. And I'd like to see it continue to do that, but in a sustainable manner. And thank you guys for the work that you're doing. We really appreciate it. And Ed, of course, you're always welcome to come back on. You know that. Marisol, I'd like to extend that invitation to you as well, to continue talking, we can talk about healthy reefs, and we can talk about other work that's being done in the Cancun area, in the Playa del Carmen area. I think it would be great.
For sure. Thank you, Andrew, for inviting me.
Yeah, Marisol's doing exciting work on other issues, so you should talk to her again in the future.
Yeah, I also work for another NGO called Psychology, working on islands, so I can talk about that.
Ooh, that would be very cool. That'd be very cool. I'm getting very excited here. We got a good source. That'd be awesome. But until then, I want you guys to enjoy the conference. And I think it's about 4:15 there. So have a great dinner, have some nice drinks.
Poster session time.
Poster session. Oh, that's fun. I always like the poster sessions. Right on. That should be a lot of fun. But thank you very much for coming on. We really appreciate it. And enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you.
So that's the interview with Ed and Marisol. Thank you very much, guys. I really appreciate you guys coming on the show, and I really appreciate you guys, the audience, to listen to it. I love this kind of stuff. Let me know what you think about the episode. Go to speakupforblue.com/group to join our Speak Up for Blue Facebook community and continue the conversation there. You can start a post, whatever you want to do, and start that conversation. I really love to hear your thoughts on the program, on what Ed and Marisol are doing. If you have any questions, Ed's in the program. Ed's in the group as well. So if you have any questions, you can tag Ed or Edward Hind-Ozan is his full name. Or just ask him. He'll be there. He's pretty good in that group. And we really appreciate you guys listening. And I apologize if there were any audio problems, but like I said before, they were doing it from an iPhone. The connection kind of went in and out every once in a while, but they're doing it from the conference floor. You can't ask for more effort than that. I think that was really great. But anyway, I really appreciate you guys listening. You have been listening to the Speak Up for Blue podcast. Don't forget, if you want to become a Patreon contributor, go to speakupforblue.com/Patreon, Patreon. And I want you guys to have a happy Wednesday and happy conservation.